2023 has just been a year full of confidence. The housing market has never seen higher pricing, but we've seen buyer demand certainly come to a screeching halt because of the lack of affordability. Now what we're looking at as we go into 2024 with an election year, there is an uncertainty in the financial markets like we have never seen before. In this video, I'm sitting down with Melody Wright. Melody Wright is hitting the streets. She went through the 2008 great financial crisis and was involved in all of the fallout of the banking system. And now she's very concerned where we are today. And I hope you enjoy the show. Melody Wright, thank you so much for joining us again. And, there's a lot of confusion going on right now. So many people are hearing different stories that are playing, it's all going to play out. But, what do you think about, we have two sides to this coin. The housing market inventory is low and will be low for many years. Some people are saying, and that's going to prevent home prices from going down. And then on the other side, we know that we have buyers that have slammed on the brakes because the affordability issue. I mean, it doesn't really, matter to them, even in some cases what the interest rate is. If it goes down, they're not going to buy. Is there enough buyer demand out there? I mean, out of everything that's going on, let's just dive in today and talk about your opinion of the housing market.
Absolutely. So, I think it is a very confusing picture. And, what I do, just to kind of explain what I do each week and how I know what I know, is I track about 75 cities, and I track listings for sale, listings for rent, listings for short-term rental, as well as just kind of their demographics, et cetera. And so I've been tracking inventory since January. I can't believe it's almost been a full year since I started doing that, because what we were actually seeing last year, inventory start to tick up in certain cities out of a seasonal time. And that's when I started looking at it because, the indices in our industry are just so lagged. And so it's very difficult to get it. I just remember being fooled last time, because I was a financial analyst, in corporate finance, and it was my job to kind of put together the messaging on the housing market. And, all of the economists from back then had us fooled, and, we kept thinking that it was going to turn around. So, that's when I decided this time after, a few years ago, I just started diving into macro, studying, the Fed, studying the global bond markets, et cetera, really trying to understand, because I wanted to know how everyone could have gotten it so wrong last time. And so that's kind of why I do what I do. And after all that study and reading Ivy Zelman, I'm a huge fan of hers, I had to get out on the road because it just wasn't making sense. Like you could feel the mania, et cetera. And that's why I went out and I visit all these cities to see what's, boots on the ground. And so my perspective is very different from most, and what we have a lot of is everybody, so I'll bring up a neighborhood or I'll bring up a city and everybody says, well, that's not happening in my city. And, absolutely. It's certainly not happening at the scale of, say, Austin, for instance, or Nashville or Charlotte. But every city, even where I was living in Pittsburgh. So a lot of people will push back in the Northeast, and there's pockets of this speculation in every city that has, a significant population. All you have to do is go out and find it. And so, we don't have an inventory shortage. We have an affordable inventory shortage. That's for sure. Like what's out there, people cannot afford. And I think that's more of why, essentially when people saw the housing market was frozen, why would they list their home? And at the same time too, I think that there's been a lot of private transactions that we don't know about. And, everyone wants to say pocket listings aren't a thing or blah, blah, blah. But it was such a thing that, NAR was terrified of them, and they did presentations about how can we keep our dominance with MLS, because what I think happened is you had a lot of these sort of smaller mortgage brokers working with smaller builders to build just for them, to build Airbnbs just for them. This happened in Appalachia at scale. And there's a great actual article from June about this group of people that did this. This is why we have 8,000 Airbnbs in Sevierville, Tennessee right now. That is just insanity. But they would just build them, and then they'd put them on Facebook, and they sell them on Facebook. And so I think that we have a misunderstanding of what transpired over the last several years. And the other thing that I think people did that we don't, us in the industry, it's just hard to fathom, I think, is people would buy and they turn around and sell sometimes in the same month, like to investors. And so when we looked at our transaction numbers, or we looked at kind of what was listed and sales, like we had a misunderstanding of what was happening. This is what I believe, and we won't know for years if I'm right. I mean, because the only way you can really know for sure is to look at those county records. And there's over 3,000 counties in this country. And, I think we talked about this, but, some of them still use fax machines and pencils. Like they're not electronic. And some of them are still delayed in recording permits. There was a time when Prince George's took 365 days to record a document. And so how can you really know what's happening when you have those kind of data lags? So, what is my assessment? My assessment is we have a lot of delusional people who think their homes are worth this astronomical amount, and they're not. They're just simply not. And because there's no demand for that. Everything that was being built out there was luxury for multifamily as well. Luxury, or at least, so luxury, maybe not so much on the builder side, but at a price point of over $400,000 everywhere I went. And so that is, the ordinary American cannot afford that. And, our median income in this country is around $79,000 adjusted for household income for, inflation. And they can't afford a $400,000 home, plus property taxes, plus insurance, plus HOA fees, plus repairs. I was thinking about you, Todd. I went and visited my sister yesterday and in Knoxville, and she's like, oh my gosh, we had to replace our water heater. It's 29 years old. And she was just saying, Melody, it's just like, it's something every single day, with this house, because they have a very nice home on a lake, and it's a lot of upkeep with a pool, et cetera. So, I said to her, I think when I start kind of doing more official education, because I really would like to do financial education, I'm going to say to people, unless you can put $500 a month in a house account on top of everything else, you shouldn't be buying a home. Like it's just, otherwise you are going to come under stress at some point. And so anyway, that's a long answer to say that I think that we have a true misunderstanding. Wall Street came up, bought these homes at the end of the last crisis, and then everybody went gangbusters, building for rent, building multifamily, and the two didn't talk to each other. And so we have excess inventory out there, and it's not affordable. And I think that, as the new builds, we've seen that those new home sales slow, even with all of those aggressive buy downs. And they got super aggressive in October and November, just unbelievable amounts of cash they were throwing at people. And they recognize that decrease in price, which is very shocking because, they don't, they're not really even recording all the concessions that they're giving. So we've seen that that demand is gone. And so now you're going to have the builders, and then you're going to have the sellers that have been sitting on the sidelines at the same time competing, at the very same time that all the multifamily and built to rent is going to be competing for them as well with, you talked about this, rent specials. So in these 75 cities, I literally go almost every week and look at these cities, like on realtor.com, on other listing sites. And on the listings for rent, you've just got, you know how you have the picture cards, but you just got rent special, rent special, rent special. And essentially they're doing what the builders did. Like you kind of said, they're giving concessions, they're giving you 3 months free, they're, dancing a little jig for you, whatever. But so now we have all this housing, and we haven't even started talking about the people that are coming under stress that bought 9 houses, and so giving up one is not a big deal. But suddenly they're trying to give up one. They can't sell it. Now they've put 2 on the market because maybe they can sell that other one. And then it's 3. And so, this is, and then you have the boomers who are retiring at 10,000 a day. They're not going to, in their second, third, we've got 15 million vacant homes in this country. They're not going to want to carry that cost anymore when they can, they can just put it in a bank account. And the same for people that were in long-term rental. My brother-in-law, he was in a long-term rental, and the landlord just said, I'm sick of this. Will you buy it? And he said, yes, and so I think that because people are seeing these increased costs, that we're going to have a lot of inventory come at once. And I think that last year we rode a wave of sentiment all the way through the year. Quite honestly, as the stock market was starting to rise, people started feeling, whether it's true or not, they started feeling like they were wealthier, and it made them more willing to make bigger decisions. And I honestly think we'll see a little bit of that this time, as well as, this recent run up. And I know that's kind of moderated, and I haven't looked yet today, but I imagine with that jobs number, people were okay with that. So, not sure. Point being that the idea of wealth, the idea people look and they say, oh, at my Zestimate, that's how much I'm wealthy because of my Zestimate. I'm wealthy because of my stocks. But the reality is that equity is ephemeral. That equity, if you move, it's gone. It's absolutely gone, because you can't buy a like home for, the same price almost. So that's that I think that there's just a lot of narrative and a lot of misunderstanding, but hopefully that kind of sums up my current view.
Yeah. I mean, certainly a lot to unpack. I think, Melody, everything that you're saying, and me working in the industry every single day, I mean, what we're basically looking at is that the consumers, just their affordability is shot. I mean, right. People just can't afford things. And we see that because they're not paying things off. And, there's a huge disconnect between the politicians, the government, in my opinion, and the people of this country. Most people aren't wealthy. Even the middle class, I mean, they're really being hit hard right now. So you have, I wouldn't even say, well, we could extend it and say the top 20% earners, but I think really it's probably the top 5% earners that are still able to feel comfortable, at the level of costs that, of living right now. That, I think we've just hit the pinnacle. We've hit the point of, it can't go any further. And, you get these people that are saying prices are only going to go up. And I wonder, what foundation they have on that, or what they think is going to come other than bailouts and stimulus, where essentially we'll just be, a communistic type of country, because, or dictatorship that just feeds you or feeds us to live. Because other than that, there's really no, I mean, the free market is just disintegrating. So when we take, you just said it, about 80,000 on an adjusted income, annual earnings, a household needs to spend 7 to 8 times their earnings to afford to buy a house right now. And when we talk about the builders and the cost of building, a lot of that's because of red tape. It's not because of the profit that the builder's making necessarily. It's the time that it takes for the builder to stick a shovel in the ground. It's the roads, it's the infrastructure, stormwater management. Now it's the building codes, the green initiatives, the costs that go in, everything from, making sure that essentially the house doesn't breathe unless it's told where to breathe, right? So things are really overly tight. They have to have these air tests and all these expensive products, sprinkler systems, all these things that go into it that people don't realize just jacks the cost significantly of the build. And the issue is that a builder can't build a house that's $300,000, a single family house, when they have all these infrastructure costs and building costs. So that's why we're building McMansions and houses that aren't for the people. And then on the other side, we see the mortgage market being manipulated, and and people are buying these houses, and now the costs are going up. Do you think we're going to see a massive price correction in 24?
I don't think in 24. I think, now if we have a credit event, similar to Lehman or Bear Stearns, and, if we have sort of exponential, reduction in employment, I think we could see price corrections accelerate next year. But it's an election year. And as much as I want to say, I would love to stand on the table and say it's going to happen next year. But we all know that in an election year, they're going to do everything they can to find some good, bad guys to sort of pretend to kind of, wrangle so that politicians can look like the good guys while putting everything on hold. And, and what I mean by this is like similar to what just happened with the veterans loans, that, there was an allegation that certain servicers told them that they would have a workout that they didn't have, that, the VA, some say let expire, others say they didn't have the authority to extend this program. And so instead of looking at these 6,000 borrowers, it would take me about a month just by myself to look through that and tell somebody, hey, this is what happened. And yeah, you need to go tell that servicer XYZ. You need to do reparations for these borrowers with XYZ. And, that wouldn't take any time at all to do that review. Instead, what happened is, they're going to just extend it for 6 months to May. And if you understand the default machine, that means absolutely that those foreclosures will not hit until, basically we're all voting. Okay. And so I think that with the recent data breaches, what potentially could happen, the data breaches at the big servicers, Mr. Cooper and Loan Care, that the government may come in and say, you know what, because we know FHA has significant delinquency. And we also know they know it because I have some clients that they've actually been in touch with them about some debt funds, et cetera. And so they see what's coming, whether the mainstream media does or not. And so likely we'll see a moratorium on foreclosures. The state AGs will get in as well, and they run for election. So this is going to be a hot button issue with affordability. So if we have a credit at certain areas, like I think in Florida, we're going to see some significant correction. But I think honestly, unless we have one of those events, the biggest price drops probably won't come until 25.
Now you're talking about and I do want to dive in a little bit and talk about the FHA, because I saw it too, that they have this new bailout, this credit program, mortgage payment credit that will, sort of prevent evictions for FHA for at least the next 3 years. So there is a bailout that's on the table. But we look at 2024, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4 million home sales nationwide. If we look back, that's pretty low. Typically, we've been averaging around 6 to 8 million over the last, decade or so, home sales per year. So in some ways, looking at that data, you'd say that we're about half of where we could or should be in the country, with home sales being somewhere around 7 or 8 million sales a year. With the sellers, so, there's this theory that I believe anyway, everyone says that if the Fed, which they probably will, as you said, we have an election year, pivots says that the economy is doing well. We've soft landed the plane. Unemployment is low, comparatively speaking. We can back off on interest rates. We get an easing in the bond market. Mortgage rates drop into the fives, which I think is a good possibility headed into 24. A lot of people think that this is going to be enough to raise up the demand of buyers on the sideline and actually start to see price appreciation because of their activity, the buyers coming back in, start to see price appreciation of housing again. What I believe is going to happen is by dropping those interest rates, time will tell whether I'm right or not. But what I believe is that there's a pent up seller demand that is sitting on the sidelines. Like you said, you have Airbnb hosts that, have said, I'm not making any money. You have sellers that are, waiting for interest rates to drop so that they can look for something to buy even, or just have more buyers interested in their property. That, and we're not even talking about the fact that a lot of the silent generation and the baby boomers that are coming into retirement don't have enough money to retire. And they're living in houses that are too big and cost them too much money. So they're doing things like reverse mortgages to where they're eating away at their funds. Their kids aren't going to see their houses, right? Equity. I think what's going to happen is the Fed drops the rates and we see all these sellers hit the market at the same time, regardless of the foreclosures that could be held back. If we're looking at, I think you said 16% of the loans, somewhere around there, are FHA. You just mentioned maybe 6,000 of the VA borrowers that are in default. But if we take, those and we just kick the can down the road, what about the rest of the inventory that could hit the market? Do you think the Fed dropping rates are going to see home prices increase in that of active inventory, level out? Or do you start, or do we, like we already see now, major home price declines? Do you think that buyers are just fed up? They know the affordability is terrible. No matter what the interest rate gets to, that we have to see price corrections.
Yeah, I definitely think the latter is true. Like, buyers are fed up and they're mad. And I think they understand, just like I do. I look back on 2021 and realize, even as skeptical as I am, I was delusional too. Like, we all had confidence in 21. Like, things were getting better. Like, we were seeing wage increases. It was like, what? It had been so long. We'd been toiling since the GFC, and so I think we all felt a little richer, et cetera. And so that fear of missing out, everybody, that FOMO. But I think now that we've all had time, and we've looked at the housing market and we know it's frozen, we all can look back at ourselves and say, what happened to you? Like, what were you doing? Like, were you crazy? And so I do think, I don't see home prices going up. Now, could we have a couple more months in certain areas where that confidence in the stock market, and that year-end bonus is coming in March, as we know, for a lot of people, we could see what we've been seeing, which home prices have increased, not because sales have increased or there's that FOMO. It's just the people that are transacting are the ones that can afford it. And so that's why these home prices look high. So I think we could have a couple of months where it looks like that's happening, similar to what's going on right now. But the minute sentiment turns in that respect, and those top 5% or top 20% are like, wait, what is happening? That's when, honestly, I think it's just going to start boom, 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 boom. And in places like Florida, I mean, people are waking up. People are finally waking up in Lakewood Ranch. That is an abomination. I'm not trying to offend anyone in Lakewood Ranch, but when you go see the amount of homes, like, I can hear these hammers in my dreams, like, that are under construction there. And the cell signal is terrible. Like, I mean, it's just, it's in the middle of Florida. And so, and it was a place that was hit last time. That's what's so crazy. But anyway, places like Florida, this is why I'm so focused, because there is the speculation. And so I think we will see it there, and probably faster there than everywhere else. But as the narrative starts to turn, then I think we'll start to see home prices decelerate. And I do think we'll see the year 24 end, with negative home prices, probably around 5% if nothing changes. But 24, I see a much more aggressive price correction.
What do you think is going to happen with home sales? You think we just won't have any? I mean, it would just be, more of a stagflation?
Well, I think death, divorce, default, the DOD, like these things will, the DOD moves a whole bunch of people every year. And so, there's going to be sales like that. That's going to happen.
But I mean, as far as
people have choice.
but will those prices be down? I mean, I'm just looking at it and I say, and again, I mean, just trying to, a lot of people, they say that my, outlook is, very bearish. And I think I would like to say that my outlook is actually kind of practical, because when I look at the amount of people that can't afford to buy, or they think that they can afford to buy, but you just said, was it your sister that you were visiting in Knoxville? And when she's talking about, replacing things on her house, I mean, you talk about these things as their pain points because they bother people, even people that have the money to have a house and have a swimming pool. They're not happy with the way that what things cost. I mean, I just had one of my clients, a plumber, replaced some kind of an ejection pit. It's just a small thing that goes underneath of a bar sink when you can't drain normally, and that was like $386, I think, was the actual cost from the supply house. I mean, we're talking about something that cost $150 4 years ago. So, with the costs that have doubled in a lot of these things, I mean, affordability is just going away. Yeah. Do you think that the long-term plan here is that, so if the solution is, well, first let me say what I was going with that. In 2021, we saw wage growth because people couldn't get employees.
That's right.
And, so that was why we saw wage growth. It was jammed down the employers' throats. It wasn't because they wanted to pay more money. What was happening was they were busier than they had ever been before. They were selling things that they had never sold before. They were making more money than they ever made before. That, for the most part, is in October. If the business owners are out there, they know what I'm talking about. I mean, I was just in a carpet supply house yesterday, and I was talking to them. They're a wholesale supplier. They said that it's just fallen off the face of the earth, business, and that this time of year is traditionally slower, but not for the last several months. So October, they started seeing a massive slowdown. A lot of people I'm talking with say the same thing. I think the recession has definitely showed up. We're not talking about it yet. But the people paid all this extra money to employees. Now, granted, it was probably long overdue. People need to make more money, but that doesn't affect the affordability. It's like having a house that you spent a lot of money on to renovate. It doesn't mean you're going to get the money out. Having employees that you're paying more doesn't mean you're going to continue that because your business drops off. So there's no guarantees. So when we're looking at the fact, that's what scares me a lot about the employment right now, is that a lot of these employers, these blue collar workers, not just the white collar, but the blue collar too, a lot of them that are working these construction jobs, man, if this thing does come to a halt, we're going to be talking about hundreds of thousands of people that are going to be, looking for work. And I'm just, so from a practicality standpoint, so my question is, do you think that we are going to become a renter's nation more than a homeowner's nation?
I mean, it certainly looks that way, but I hope that isn't what happens, But when it is cheaper to rent than it is to buy in most cities in the United States, then that is absolutely going to be what happens. Because, I know a lot of people, I talk I try to get intelligence from all my followers. I talk to people all the time, and they're doing things like selling their house and renting because they want to capture the equity and wait for the correction. And so, yeah.
There's a new legislation proposed. Actually, the Democrats brought this bill forward, and it's a bill that essentially it would require hedge funds defined as corporations, partnerships, or real estate investment trusts that manage funds pooled from investors to sell off all single-family homes they own over a 10-year period, and eventually prohibit such companies from owning any single-family homes at all. There's two sides to this coin, right? I get it. I understand it. The Obama administration, so the Democrats are, presented this bill. Obama was the one that actually sold all of the foreclosed, or a lot of the foreclosed homes during the '08 crisis to Wall Street back in 2011, 2012. There are a lot of people that say, capitalist, that this goes directly against capitalism because government regulation going in and telling companies that they can't do something that a free market should be entitled to do. I get the other side of the coin where a lot of these corporations bid up the prices back in the 2020, 2021,
Absolutely.
paying cash, knocking people out of the market completely. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the capitalist in me is not a fan. I wish we could figure out how to solve our own problems without, kind of government intervention. But the fact also is that the housing market is run by the government. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. And so, I think I have to come down on the side that I'm not a fan of this legislation. I think it's time for us to start actually taking a stand locally, where we live and HOAs, things like that. Like we need to kind of, I think that we've been frustrated with government, right? They don't represent the people, as you kind of started the show saying. These aren't, they don't look like you and me. They don't even, looking at that hearing with Chase and others testifying, Jamie Dimon, I was just like, who are these people, and the politicians as well. And so they don't look like us and they don't really care. So I think we the people need to start standing up, start participating in our local government, start, making a stand. And because if we want to continue to live in a democracy and we want a true capitalist structure, which this is not it. This is nowhere near capitalism right now. Then we're going to have to take some action and responsibility as well. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, do you think corporations should be allowed to buy single-family houses at tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of scale?
I'm not a fan, but again, I believe in capitalism, and but the problem is, we aren't living in it, and we don't have the other side of the coin, which is the creative destruction. And, if we had creative destruction, I can tell you right now, American homes for rent in some of these places they're going to bite the dust like nobody's business. And I do think you're getting a sense that, there's this great book called Plunder that was written by a current attorney at the DOJ about private equity. And so and I just recently heard about a big investigation being launched into what they're doing in healthcare. So it feels like, there are folks coming after private equity. But these people as bad actors, because a lot of them are getting in trouble, like there's all kinds of lawsuits out there for the way that they're treating tenants, et cetera. Like if we let that play out and we don't bail them out, they'll die an inglorious death. And so we just can't bail them out. This will naturally correct itself, in my opinion, because what they're doing out there, I mean, the tenants are just, they're furious. And I think the people that they wouldn't like go to those properties anymore because then, they have a terrible reputation. So it's just hard, Todd. We've so corrupted our capitalist system. It's very difficult to see solutions. And that's why I talk a lot about personal responsibility, because the problem does seem so big. But how do you solve big problems? You take the first step. And that is, I think, if you don't want a short-term rental in your neighborhood, or you don't want Wall Street buying a home, then, go talk to your neighbors and talk about the HOA and come together as a community and take a stand.
Yeah, you're saying as far as banning them at the HOA level, again, I don't know if they can, and the only thing they could do, like you said, is ban the rental. But, when I look at proposals like this, I mean, this is something that I've believed in. I think that small business runs America, or it should. It used to, and it's still probably the largest employer in America is small business. Collectively, they employ more people. These are the businesses where the owners, if they can't afford to take their own paycheck, they put it in a drawer and make sure that their employees are paid. Now, I'm not talking about bureaucrats that just cut locations and fire people and get rid of, shut things down, just to look good for the shareholders. But I think, it's almost like it's too big to fail. If we look at like the banks being too big to fail and we have to bail the banks out, because if we don't, I mean, look what happened with, the March 12th weekend where the banks were bailed out. And we're not talking about people that had $250,000 in the bank. We're talking about people that had, hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, right? And Silicon Valley, specifically. But if you take the housing market, if we flood the market with inventory, this is a very precarious spot, because the more we flood the inventory on the market, the cheaper the inventory will become, the more that snowball rolls down the hill and gets into, really an avalanche, because then the banks need to be bailed out even more. So I think when we're looking at these corporate owners that own hundreds of thousands of properties, I mean, we've gotten ourselves right. It's kind of hard to put the horse back into the barn, right?
Yeah.
But it's definitely interesting. I mean, what can people do? I mean, besides HOAs, you say go to their local governments and things like that. I mean, do you think that's really, you think that works?
Well, it doesn't work now because the incentives aren't there, and people have stopped really. What I see missing is effective city planners. I was just talking to a client yesterday. She owns a lot of multifamily in California, and it's really the city council dictates what the city planner is actually according to my client, very intelligent, does have actual solutions that might work, but the city council refuses. And so it's just, for my client, it's untenable in California. Like, she's got properties that she was thinking about developing. She's not going to do that. she's got to sell them, like, because it's just insane. So, is that effective? I don't. Listen, it wouldn't happen overnight. And maybe I sound a little naive, but at the same time, we have choices by educating ourselves and choosing not to rent from one of these institutional landlords. And, if anybody is out there trying to, look for a long-term rental, et cetera, and you don't know how to check who owns that, come talk to me, find me, and I'll help you. I'll show you how to figure that out. So we can, kind of make our stance known in that way as well, by refusing to rent from these slumlords, because that's what a lot of them are. So, does it work? No, but it'll start to work when enough of us start doing it. It's we the people, and we cannot, kind of renege on our responsibility when we live in this country. I think that it's a combination. On the one side of me, I mean, Todd, I just want to say, yeah, go get them, ban it, slap them around too while you're at it. But I really would like to see a future where we truly do have capitalism again. I think we just have to try.
Yeah, I mean, you have it on two sides, right? So you have the one side where if we have another '08 crisis where we have massive foreclosures, there's the theory of who's going to buy these houses and turn them in, to sustainable, neighborhoods with, to where the grass isn't 4 feet tall and the roofs aren't leaking. And I think that's one of the concepts of shipping them off to Wall Street in the first place was, hey, you need to come in here, bring your money, bring your deep pockets, buy this property for pennies on the dollar, nickels on the dollar, and, but rent it back to the people that have lost their homes. Maybe the intentions were, I don't know, maybe the intentions were good. But then Wall Street or institutional buyers got that taste, right, of the profits. And then we turned housing into a, stock instead of a, shelter over our heads and for our families. And now we're putting more and more pressure on Americans more than we ever have to, either move into a high price rental or a high priced ownership, and which is better. And then we have on the flip side of it, the government is doing everything they can to not evict people or foreclose on people. And this is another problem in itself. And so the way I look at it is we have, through whatever reason, we have allowed housing to become unaffordable. And as a result of that, now we're in a situation because we've encouraged people to buy unaffordability that now they're struggling. So we have to have these systems to bail it out. The problem is, just like the welfare system, is once you start initiating it, you're not going to get people to take it away because it will become inhumane. Right? When you're taking care of somebody, it's like not teaching your kid financial literacy and then blaming them because they can't make it because you never before. All you did while the kid was growing up was provide, and they didn't even think about the alternative. And now all of a sudden you're the parent saying, well, I know I brought you up that way, but you're 35 years old and I'm going to shut you off now. And then your spouse says, well, we can't really do that because we've been taking care of them for 35 years. What concerns me is that, we're getting into this dependency. We're turning a lot of our society to be 100% dependent on bailouts, whether it's the welfare system or not. And I'm not saying that the welfare system isn't good and needed. Okay, don't misunderstand me. I know a lot of people want to quickly judge me on that, and I believe in a welfare system. I just don't believe in it being for 30 years. That we should be elevating people and getting them out of the situation that they're in. And if we're continually making affordability worse and we're continually giving them more and more stimulus, we're not showing them how to lift up. But let's just take a look before we go. Let's just take a look at this to my point. And you've already spoken about this, but this is FHA's mortgage reduction plan to lower borrowers' cost without a pricey refinance. Now, being in mortgage, Melody, that a lot of people that have gotten themselves into debt, one of the ways is to consolidate. So a lot of people, they're like, well, I've got expensive credit cards, or I have a HELOC, or, I have this debt. So what the mortgage world wants to do is say, well, if you have equity in your home, why don't we just debt consolidate and get rid of the high cost of your 20% credit card fee? You owe $50,000 in credit card bills. Why don't we take all that, roll it into another mortgage? But we know now that that's not very practical because it's harder to get financed now. And It's expensive. So here's the FHA, and we can look at this here. This is on investopedia.com. This is just like a summary. And by the way, FHA is hoping to have this worked out, this new plan. They put it out in May for opinion. And they're hoping that they have some kind of a, like you said, additional bailout by the end of the year. Now, keep in mind, folks, we've already been doing this. We prevented mortgage eviction, foreclosures from happening altogether. We gave stimulus up to $50,000 per household in some cases to states to be able to distribute to people that were still struggling after the mortgage moratorium ended in July of 21. Simultaneously, this other money was issued to the states to pay, Maryland up to $50,000 per homeowner. Not only that, but we've recast 30-year mortgages for FHA and VA to 40-year mortgages. Not only that, we've taken up to 30% of their loan balance, put it on a second mortgage, dumped it on the back end of the loan, interest-free to reduce their monthly payments. And we're still, as Melody said, looking at, she had mentioned in previous conversations, not necessarily today, but that there was almost a 10% delinquency, people that were delinquent on their FHA mortgages still today. So these key takeaways here is that the new FHA proposal would let mortgage borrowers reduce mortgage payments for up to 5 years, a minimum of 3 years, maximum of 5. FHA said the plan is needed because borrowers behind on their mortgages can't refinance to catch up. And then finally, the key takeaway here, zero interest liens would be added to the end of the mortgage or be resolved during if that borrower decided to sell their home or refinance down the road. Melody, what is your opinion of yet again? You had mentioned the government being involved so deeply in mortgage. So maybe explain that, but what's your opinion of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's expected, of course. We kind of knew that we'd have something like this because we can't use something like HARP right now, Home Affordable Refinance. I mean, which was a program that was leveraged last time. To me, so one of the things I do for certain clients is I still audit borrower calls and things like that. So I'm deep in this, and I'm thinking of one particular borrower right now that has been in distress since 2018. I've heard, hours of kind of their calls, and they took every single workout that you've just mentioned, every single one. They took the COVID forbearance, they then did the 40-year mod. They did they put their loan, they put all those payments to the back of the loan. Then they did the 40-year mod, and they still cannot make their payment. Like they still can't because they can't afford the home. That's they just can't afford the home. And if you hear these borrowers, the amount of stress that they're under, this is not, it's a terrible situation. So I'm not a fan of this program. I saw how ineffective HAMP was, for many people. That just, it didn't help. And, when you lose your job and you cannot get another one, for a very long time, like you cannot afford your house. And so anyway, it's the eventuality. We're going to see several new programs, especially as prime borrowers come under distress, which I think that's probably going to happen around June. We'll start to really see more material distress. So we'll see more of these programs, but I'm not a fan. We should let the process play out. It is horrible as it is to lose your home. It's also a life lesson, and it teaches you about, what being under such significant debt can do to your life. And I'm just not a fan of debt. I mean, honestly, Todd, one of the things that just kills me is everybody's focus on the payment. I've been talking to underwriters recently, and they're saying, they're like, well, they could make, when I talk about inflated credit scores because of student loans, and they're saying, well, they shouldn't, that you shouldn't have to count all that debt, just what they pay each month. Well, wait a minute. Like they're on that plan, that, income-based plan, because they can't afford to pay their actual balance off. And so people stop looking at debt to income. I mean, and as an indication of ability to repay. And so I think that we've gone off the rails, even though everyone does that credit quality gospel singing. Sure, their credit scores look great, but that AUS, or the automated underwriting systems of the GSCs, stopped really kind of considering in the same way, kind of debt. And so we've let our people get so burdened under debt because we need to keep them consuming, right? Consumption is 67% of GDP. That's different from Canada, which is like 21%. I just realized that when I did a Canadian Spaces the other day on Twitter. And so, I mean, but that's what everyone needs to understand. People are pushing you into those homes because they're pushing you to keep consuming, and they're pushing you to keep getting under debt so that you can't change jobs. You can't, kind of have freedom in your career. You essentially are becoming a slave and a serf, and so that's what I am so passionate about, is because it happened to my family, and it happened really to me, not understanding, student loan debt, not understanding credit card debt, because the thing that we know will happen, Todd, and you and I absolutely know this because we've been in this business too long, is they're going to take that HELOC, or they're going to take that closed-end second, and then they're going to still use their credit cards. And then they're going to go into default again. And so that's why also I think this could take, you and I have talked, I don't think the fire starts in mortgage because of all these different programs. But in about a year and a half, 2 years, the fire will be there. And they can try and kick the can, our most used phrase this year, as much as possible, but the bill will eventually come due. And I think that people that talk about the fact that we're just going to keep, we're going to get into hyperinflation and these prices are just going to go gangbusters, they are missing the social element. We will, at some point, when we have so many homeless people because evictions are finally going through, and we have so many homeless people because they can't afford their rent or their home, then people are going to be, this group of people is getting bigger and bigger, and we're all going to have to kind of take a stand. And I think there's going to be social issues if we don't really address this, and we address the inequality and the gap between the top 20% and the rest of the country. Like, this inequality, the wealth inequality is just, it is dangerous to a society, and it will bring it down. So, I don't see that eventual income, because I think we will have, the social fabric will be torn, and we won't make it to hyperinflation, in my opinion. And of course, I could be wrong.
Wow. Yeah, that's a whole nother show, Melody. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And, I guess the final thing that I'd like to bring out with what you just said in a nutshell is that the government should stay out and let this thing work out, because kicking the can down the road isn't good for the borrowers. You just identified a call that you were involved with, or multiple calls, hours of calls, with a borrower that's been struggling since 2018. They clearly need to get out of that house and reduce their costs, at whatever cost. But here's the thing that's going to show up, and I'm starting to see it now. I'm already starting to see it now, even in the wealthier neighborhoods. There's that one house where the paint is peeling on outside trim and hasn't been corrected, and it's deteriorating, and the siding's coming off. And things are starting to happen that is a clear indication that the affordability in that house is not well enough to maintain the home. You can reduce the mortgage payment all you want. When people can't afford, if they can't afford a $3,000 mortgage payment, and they can really only afford to cover a $2,000 mortgage payment, and that's it, what happens is you drop their mortgage payment to $2,000. They still don't have the money in excess to fix a $20,000, $30,000 heating and air system, a $10,000 or $20,000 siding bill, a $5,000 or $6,000 painting bill, a $25,000 or $30,000 roof bill. When you start looking at all of these costs that aren't going to be taken care of for the house to be in a decent, maintained condition, those houses are going to sink the rest of the neighborhood. Because the minute a house goes for sale across the street or next door, the buyers are going to be looking around and they're going to say, man, look at that house across the street is falling down. That's going to crush the values. And you're right, these things may not show up. What you're talking about is social deterioration. You're talking about the deterioration of the quality of life, increased homelessness, poverty, things that are as a result of, propping up markets, falsely stimulating and, making things look good under your watch when the underlying issues, in fact, are not good at all. Melody, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. I love you're a return contributor to our channel. Guys, if you want to learn more about Melody Wright, all of her information is in the show notes. She has a YouTube channel. Follow her on Twitter or X, whatever it's called nowadays. But Melody, thank you so much. Any parting words of advice?
Yeah, I would just say, guys, you may be forced into a decision because of a life event. Just be armed with all the information. And if you're worried, please, kind of reach out to me. You can @ me on Twitter and I will try to get back to you because, you can make better decisions in this environment. And so, but, I personally would stay on the sidelines if that's an option.
We thank you so much. Happy holidays to you if we don't talk to you before.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for watching the video and love to hear from you. Drop your comments below as to what you think we have in the year or two ahead of us with the financial markets. And if you like the video, you can smash the thumbs up and let Melody and I know that you did. And as always, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so now. And don't hesitate to share us with your friends. See you next time. Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.